The Southern Cal Trojans have definitely gotten better this offseason, but they are still not one of the top 3 challengers to South Carolina's women's basketball program. I'll explain why on today's Locked On Gamecocks.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also the lead publisher for Gamecock Digest over on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team both faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope that you've all had a great start to the work week thus far. We're going to talk a little bit of both women's basketball and football on today's edition of Locked On Gamecocks. Later on in the show, I'm going to rank the top position groups on South Carolina's football team along with the bottom position groups and give my rationale for each prospective position group. But before we dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about South Carolina's women's basketball team, and more specifically, a team that is now perceived as one of the top challengers to the Gamecocks' reign this next women's basketball season in the Southern Cal Trojans. A lot of people now think that after adding the #1 high school recruiting class in the country, after adding transfers like Stanford's Kiki, Iriafen, and Oregon State's Talia von Oelhoffen, that the Trojans are now potentially the #1 contender for the title this next season outside of South Carolina. But to be honest with y'all, I still don't even think that the Trojans are one of the top 3 challengers to the Gamecocks. When I talked about this back on April 11th, this was in the midst of the off-season transfer portal window. My top 3 challengers that I ranked on that show were Texas, UCLA, and Notre Dame. And even after the portal window being over, even with the additions that Southern Cal has made, I still feel the same way. So why is it that I feel this way? Well, let's go over a couple different aspects about the Trojans that, at least in terms of this conversation, it hurts them a little bit. The first and probably the most obvious aspect is the fact that Southern Cal, yes, they now have a bevy of on-court talent, but what they have in talent, they currently lack in on-court team chemistry. This offseason, Southern Cal is only returning 3 players on their roster who averaged 20 or more minutes per game this past season. South Carolina, on the other hand, they are returning 8 players from last year who averaged 15 or more minutes per game. And then Texas, UCLA, Notre Dame, they all have 5 players returning who averaged 20 or more minutes per game this past season. In essence, roster continuity. South Carolina has it in spades. Texas, UCLA, and Notre Dame also have that on their roster and throughout their starting lineup. Southern Cal does not have that. And as we saw with LSU last year, who we'll bring up again in just a moment, just because you've got more talent on paper doesn't automatically mean that you're going to mesh well together. And that leads into my next point. Based on last year's numbers, at least when it comes to the bench production and the makeup of this year's team, Southern Cal might be this next season's version of the LSU Tigers from last season, a team that is stacked with talent in their starting lineup, but doesn't have a whole lot of depth to back up those players. If you looked at a hypothetical starting lineup for the Trojans right now, they would probably have Kiki Iriafen in there, obviously. They would also have a Rhea Marshall, a Juju Watkins, a Talia von Oelhoffen, and also true freshman Kennedy Smith, who was one of the top 10 prospects in the country for the 2024 class. And then 5 stars, Kaylee Heckel and Avery Howell will probably be coming off the bench. That right there is probably your top 7. But beyond those 7, there would be a massive drop-off for the Trojans. Last year, Southern Cal averaged 9.8 bench points per game. That ranked 336th nationally out of 350 Division I women's basketball teams who are registered with the NCAA's website that has all of the season statistics. Texas's team averaged 22.3 bench points per game. UCLA averaged 16.3. And Notre Dame, they weren't too far ahead, but they still beat USC in this statistical category, averaging 12.1 bench points per game in the 2023-24 season. Now, obviously, if you look at last year's numbers, the thing that you can point to is, well, their bench didn't have to do as much because Juju Watkins literally averaged like 24, 27 points per game by herself. And that is definitely true. That definitely does skew that statistic to a certain degree. But again, South Carolina fans know this better than anybody. We saw this with LSU last year. They had basically a super team with that starting lineup of Haley Van Lith, a Flau'jae Johnson, and Anissa Morrow, an Angel Reese, and a Michaela Williams. I believe all 5 of them, you put them on pretty much any other team, they average at least 12, 13, 14 points per game for their squad. But behind those 5, they did not have very much depth after just 1 or 2 injuries, and so it led to them getting knocked out in the Elite 8 of the NCAA tournament this past season. So that is something that, in my opinion, is going to hold back the Southern Cal Trojans to a certain degree in terms of the top contenders. You look at Texas, UCLA, Notre Dame, depth is not that much of an issue. Sure, again, you might say it evens out because they don't have necessarily the firepower in their starting lineup. Texas, I would say, they do, but maybe UCLA and Notre Dame, you say they don't. They still got more bench players and more depth that can come into the game and help out without there being a significant drop-off. Southern Cal, in my opinion, is not going to have that at least next year. And here's the last thing I want to talk about with the Trojans real quick. And this really doesn't have anything to do with the team itself, but they've got an entirely different challenge that they're going to have to tackle before they can be considered one of the top challengers to South Carolina this next season. And that is getting used to the Big Ten Conference, because starting next season, as weird as it's going to be, Southern Cal and UCLA both, they're going to be playing in the Big Ten. Now, you might sit there and say, well, Texas has to play in the SEC now, and like you just mentioned, UCLA is going to be joining Southern Cal in the Big Ten. So why is it that you dock Southern Cal here? Well, Texas, they have a coach that's coached in the SEC before, in Vic Schaefer. And in my opinion, the reason why they'll be the top challengers because they'll know how to play South Carolina. They play them twice this next season. UCLA, again, they played South Carolina multiple times in just the past couple years. And as I mentioned earlier, their team has roster continuity. They have played together for much longer compared to the Trojans. So they're not going to be figuring things out on their end while simultaneously trying to get adjusted to the style of play that the Big Ten possesses. And then Notre Dame, they don't have to worry about any of this outside of Stanford joining their conference because, again, conference realignment, it's weird. But Notre Dame, they're staying in the ACC. So you take all that into consideration. I would still say that even though the Trojans are definitely better than they were at the beginning of this offseason, they're still not the top challenger to South Carolina. I would still put Texas, UCLA, and even Notre Dame. I would put all 3 of those teams ahead of them. I value experience. I value these teams having depth. And also, a lot of these coaches, they've been there before. And yes, Southern Cal's head coach, she has been to the Final Four before with Cal Berkeley. but that was several years ago. And this sport right now has a lot more parity than it did back in, say, 2013 or 2014. So you've also got to deal with that at the same time. So right now, Southern Cal, you're not the top challengers of South Carolina. I don't even think you're one of the top 3 challengers, but you're certainly right there at number 4 or maybe even number 5 if you want to talk about a UConn or LSU in this conversation as well. Now, looking at football, we are multiple months away from the Gamecocks kicking off the 2024 football season. Spring practice is over. So, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about position groups. Specifically, how would I rank the position groups coming out of spring practice? Which groups look good and which groups might offer a bit of concern? We'll talk about those position groups starting in a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team, both faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So basically, if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're wasting your time. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions do apply. Welcome back to this Monday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. All right, let's rank the position groups for South Carolina's football team coming out of spring practice. The number one position group that I have on this team right now is the defensive tackle spot. Now, the reason for this is, one, they've got a good amount of depth there. You've got a TJ Sanders, Tonka Hemingway. Those are sort of your 2 most talented players in that room. But you've also got veterans like Alex Boogie Huntley and also a Nick Barrett. You got a good combination here. You got guys that are athletic and light on their feet, Hemingway and Sanders. You got guys that might help you out more in pass rush like a Boogie Huntley. And then you got a space eater right there in Nick Barrett, who stands at 6'3", 319 pounds, according to South Carolina's spring football roster. The reason why I put this position group number 1, however, is because I think this room is even deeper now than it was last year. Shane Beamer and the football staff went out there and got Pittsburgh's DeAndre Jules and Alabama's Monkel Goodwine in the transfer portal this past December. And with what I saw those 2 guys do in the spring game back on April the 20th, exactly 1 month ago to the day actually, I think that this position group is going to be a lot better because they're not going to have to leave guys out there for literally entire drives, entire halves. They're going to be able to rotate a lot more, and that's important in the trenches. You need to be able to put fresh bodies out there that you can also trust and rely on to go and make plays. So, with the talent, the experience, and the athleticism that this room brings, I think that this is the best position group on the entire football team. Now, at number 2, a very close second place. I pondered putting this position group number 1, but they just barely missed out. That's the linebacker room. Main reason why I put them here, the experience in this room is just absolutely ridiculous. Demetrius Knight Jr., Bam Martin Scott, Bengali Kamara, Mohamed Kaba, and Debo Williams, all of those guys are either 4th, 5th, or 6th year linebackers. Every single one of them. And they have all flashed at their respective stops to this point in their college career. So, That's 5 guys right there that this staff, quite frankly, they're not going to have to worry about what those guys are doing off the field or what all they're getting done in practice. And then behind those guys, you've got some promising young players in a Jerron Willis. You've also got Wendell Gregory and Fred J.R. Johnson, 2 high school signees from the 2024 class that I think could make an impact in year 1, especially on special teams. But Gregory, I think he's going to be a solid backer for you in that 3-3-5 on the edge. And then Fred J.R. Johnson, he's got the athletic traits, especially if he can run downhill. So give him some time to develop and get more snaps at linebacker, as he played both sides in high school. And I think he could wind up being a solid young linebacker in this core as well. So with all the experience and the promising young players, linebacker, I put at number 2. At number 3, I've got the running back position. In my opinion, once again, this is a position group that has a really good mixture of talent, depth, and also promising young potential players. With the talent, here it's Raheem Rocket Sanders, former first-team All-SEC running back at Arkansas. Rocket Sanders has rushed for, I believe, over 2,000, maybe 2,500 yards in his college career to this point. He's going to be your bell cow. No question about that. Yes, he dealt with injuries last year, but Raheem Rocket Sanders is a little bit lighter. He's had time to recover this offseason, did not go through spring practice. So by the time he goes out on the field for fall camp in August, he should be well rested, and he should be ready to hit the ground running. Yes, pun intended. Now, in terms of depth, you've got Oscar Attaway III coming over from North Texas. He doesn't maybe offer the same kind of dynamic ability that a Raheem Rocket Sanders can out of the backfield, but Oscar Attaway, he is basically your lunch pail running back. He can run between the tackles, got good ball carrier vision, over 1,500 career rushing yards during his time in college. He is a guy that is going to help you get some of those tough 2, 3, 4-yard gainers that you need to get every so often on offense. You can't always get the big play in the running game, so you got to have a guy that can go out there and get those 3rd and shorts, 3rd and 1s, spell your starter. Oscar Attaway is definitely going to do that. And then you got Juju McDowell. And I don't think Juju McDowell is obviously going to play the number of snaps that Rocket Sanders or Oscar Attaway plays. But again, Juju McDowell, despite his stature, he is still a guy that can make some things happen. You just have to use him in a very particular way. So I think that Juju, in a certain role, he can still be helpful in this room. And then when it comes to potential, you got guys like South Carolina State transfer Jawarn Howell, you've got second-year running back Dontavius Braswell, and you've got high school signee and eventual summer enrollee Matthew Fuller out of the state of Georgia. 3 guys that I think all could do some big things here. With Braswell, it's just simply what kind of leap does he make from year 1 to year 2? Matthew Fuller, how does he adjust to the college game and not playing, I think, 2 or 3A ball in Georgia? And then Jawarn Howell, you're going from the FCS ranks, you're going to be playing SEC competition now. We saw last year, Mario Anderson Jr., granted it was D2, not even FCS, but it took him a while to adjust to the speed of SEC football players. Jawarn Howell, have to imagine that he hit that curve a little bit in spring ball, but again, might not take him quite as long. But for now, I'll put him in the group that possesses a ton of potential that maybe we'll see down the road. Point being, running back, way deeper than it was last year. At number 4, I got safety. I think that this is one of the best safety trios in all college football that South Carolina possesses. Nick Emenworry, Jalen Kilgore, DQ Smith. All 3 of those guys can do a bevy of things. Nick Emenworry, obviously a unicorn, can basically roam the entire football field, got incredible length, can help you out in the run game, can be effective in the passing game as well. Jalen Kilgore, kind of the same mold of a Nick Emenworry, just doesn't have quite the length that he has. And DQ Smith, just built like a Mack truck. You do not want to run across his path if you are trying to get 15, 20 plus yards down the field. You throw in a true freshman enrollee in Kelvin Hunter along with a David Busey, who I believe both already are on campus. You've got 5 safeties back there that are pretty doggone talented in my opinion. Kelvin Hunter, I think, is going to make an impact in year 1. Might be able to help spell some of these guys when they need it, and definitely can make an impact on special teams. Busey, I think that he'll need a bit more time, more so special teams impact in year 1, but still, I love what they've done here at safety in terms of high school recruiting. By far the best job that this staff has done in terms of recruiting out of the high school level, maybe outside of offensive line, it has been at safety. So I got safety at number 4. Now, we'll go over the other 6 position groups in just a few moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. The Timberwolves did it. They upset the defending champs in the Denver Nuggets, winning that series 4-3 in the Western Conference semis. So now the question is this: can Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves now win the NBA championship? FanDuel still doesn't think so, but they've gained some ground. The current odds for the NBA championship have the Celtics at -160 and the Timberwolves at +290. So if you think Minnesota can go on a massive run that leads to a trophy, then put some money on that +290 and you'll make yourself a decent amount of coin here to start off your summer. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. All right. Let's wrap up the position room rankings here for South Carolina's football team coming out of spring. At number 5, I've got the tight end room. This is a room that, in my opinion, is kind of a bit overlooked because it's the tight end room. They're not going to get as much love as, say, the quarterbacks, the running backs, or the wide receivers. They do a little bit of everything, though, for you, so it's an important position. They have an all-SEC caliber starter at that spot in Joshua Simon, in my opinion, and they've got 2 guys behind him that are going to help out significantly this season, in my opinion, in the passing game. Michael Smith, coming out of the high school ranks. He's not gotten to campus yet. I imagine that he will definitely raise eyebrows in fall camp. Brady Hunt transfers over from Ball State. Not really known, I think, as a blocker, but a guy that works really hard at that spot. I think he's also going to help out in the passing game because of his previous experience being a quarterback. That's right, a quarterback going to tight end. I also think that Connor Cox can help out in this room as well. So I think they've got 4 solid bodies there that can make an impact offensively this year for South Carolina. Now, at number 6, I got the edge rusher room. In my opinion, this room has more athleticism and more experience than they did last year. They might not have one particular guy that just stands out amongst the entire group, outside of potentially a Dylan Stewart, but they've got a lot of solid contributors, I would say. Kyle Kennard being brought in from Georgia Tech. You also bring back Gilbert Edmond from Florida State, Brian Thomas Jr., Desmond Mayo Zulu, and Jatias Gear. They all have another year of experience now under their belt in Clayton White's system. So that is a room that should be better. I'm not going to say markedly better, but it should improve from 2023 to 2024. At number 7, you've probably been waiting for this, I have the quarterback position listed here. Now, some people are going to sit there and say that you are crazy for putting quarterback at 7 simply because of Lenore Sellers. And I get it. And listen, if Sellers balls out this fall, he's going to make me look very, very stupid putting quarterback at number 7. So why do I put the position here? I'm very concerned about the depth, in all honesty. Robbie Ashford, again, looked pretty well in the spring game when he actually got opportunities to throw the football and the O-line wasn't giving up a bunch of pressure. And I get it, he's got SEC experience, but Robbie Ashford is not really known for being a prolific passer. Yes, he can help bestow some knowledge onto Lenore Sellers with what he has done at Auburn and Oregon, but there's not really something that, say, he offers outside the fact he's actually played that Sellers does not offer. And then behind him, you got Davis Bevel, who's a South Carolina native that transfers from Oklahoma. And then you got Dante Reno, who, again, I think offers a lot of promise, but I still think he needs some time to get adjusted to the college level. So for those reasons, I put quarterback at number 7. At number 8, I've got offensive line. And I actually almost put offensive line lower than 8. But the reason I put the offensive line position 8 or third to last on this ranking is because I think that the staff right now, if they had to pick out linemen that they could actually rely on to go out there and play snaps at this very moment, they could pick out 8 guys. Okay, so some veterans like Vershawn Lee and Ja'Kai Moore, I think you could throw out there, along with some young guys like Marky Anderson, Tree Babalade, Josiah Thompson, Jerron Ball. So I think that this room's got a lot of potential. And with the offensive line position, obviously, you can only play 5 at a time. You're not really rotating guys out there. If you're rotating a lineman out there, it's not a good sign. Usually means someone's gotten hurt or someone is playing so bad that you just have to substitute them out of the game. So they've got 8 players, but with what we saw last year, 8 might not be enough. So if guys go down, then what does this room look like? And I get it, you could say that for almost any football team out there, but we're just talking about South Carolina here. And so for that reason, I put this room at 8. Again, kind of like quarterback, who knows? This room could end up proving to be better than where I've slotted them right now in this summer position group ranking. At number 9, I have wide receiver. I know that Shane Beamer and the staff, they added a couple guys, and Vandrevius Jacobs from Florida State and Oelhoffen Campbell from Nevada. I still got question marks about this room, y'all. They've got bodies, okay? I don't deny that. They've got literal bodies there, guys that could step up, but they don't have a lot of proven production here. If you wanted me to give you a top 5 right now, I'd say Gage Larvadain, Jared Brown, Nick Harbor, Mazio Bennett, and a Oelhoffen Campbell, or maybe an Amari Huggins Bruce. Those 5-6 guys, that's probably a rotation. But a lot of these guys have not really done anything at this kind of level. They've either starred at lower levels or they're literally coming from the high school ranks in Mazio Bennett's case. So we'll see what that room looks like, but right now I just have too many questions. So I put them at number 9, the second to worst position group on the team coming out of spring. At number 10, it had to be one of these position groups. I put the cornerback position at number 10. Only one position is settled right now, or one spot, I should say, and that is basically your top outside corner. That's going to be O'Donnell Fortune this coming fall. At the other spot, it is a who's who of players battling for that starting role. Judge Collier, Bakari Swain, David Spalding, I've heard, has even been put there, and Jalewis Sullivan, who's not even on campus right now. All 4 of those guys likely will be battling for that starting job going into fall camp and going into week 1. So I would say that with a position that's as important as cornerback, the fact that you only got one spot settled right now, that's not good. And here's the other thing. They say that this defense is still going to run some nickel sets. Who's going to be the starting nickel? We don't even know. The only guy that really has experience at that spot is David Spalding. And behind him, no one really has any experience at that spot. So, much like receiver, they've got some bodies there. But who's going to elevate? Who's going to be that guy that can help out alongside Fortune in this secondary? I just don't know right now. And I don't think really anybody knows. So, it concerns me, in all honesty, that the staff did not even get anybody out of the transfer portal at this position. At least a scholarship player, I should say. They got some walk-on defensive backs, but did not get a single scholarship player at corner. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means that they've got a lot of trust in that room, and they didn't feel like they had to go out there and get anybody. But, again, we'll see how it pans out. So right now, out of the 10 position groups on this team, I got cornerback at number 10. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope that y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show, as always. What are y'all's thoughts on Southern Cal and where they currently rank amongst the top challengers for South Carolina's women's basketball team this next season? Do you think that they're the top challenger? Do you think they're 4, 2? Let me know. Also, how would you rank the position groups on South Carolina's football team coming out of spring ball? Should quarterback be higher? Should a different position be number 1? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or you can shoot me a direct message on X at @aline_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. As always, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.